When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. Earlier this week, President Donald Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to discuss peace and security efforts towards the war in Ukraine. Now, when they met back in February of this year, tensions were very high and there were some very heated moments. This time around, the interaction seemed much calmer with a very different vibe. But is this an actual emotional difference or just a behavioral difference? What does their body language, facial expressions, and word choice reveal? And most importantly, what's an element that a lot of media sources seem to have overlooked? Let's dive right in.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have the president of Ukraine with us. We've had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very substantial progress in many ways. We had a good meeting, as you know, just a short while ago with the president of Russia, and I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it, and today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe, and we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting, and thank you very much for being here.
Thanks so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you, and using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, abducted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine, she gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want
Yeah. So we are saying this sensitive topic. Yes, please. And thanks to our partners, and that you supported this format. That after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us: UK, France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO. I mean, all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks to them, and thank you very much for invitation.
Okay, so this is the first welcome handshake, and they each make a statement. And I gotta say, I think Zelensky is a really great person to look at for body language videos because he has certain things that he does that are really, really reliable and follow a certain pattern. One of these things we see right in the beginning. As President Trump is saying that we had a lot of good discussions, we instantly see Zelensky nodding along like this. And we see this very consistently when Trump says something that Zelensky agrees with. And when he disagrees with something, we see a whole bunch of behaviors that are very clear. We're going to see it a few times throughout this video, but we also saw it right here. Because the moment Trump says that they've made progress and mentions Putin, we see an entire shift in behavior from Zelensky. First off, when Trump was talking about the good discussions, we had this gesture of agreement. Here, not so much. He's not nodding along to the fact that they've made progress. In fact, if you look at both his legs and his torso, he backs up at that moment. After Trump says progress, we see both his legs individually kick back a little bit. And if you look at his torso, that also backs up into the chair. So he straightens up a little bit, but that's because the torso is actually backing up like this. So when we hear something that we don't like or we disagree with, we put a little bit of distance between us and that thought, and we're seeing it here in his entire body. That's not the only thing we're seeing. In that very moment, we also see him kind of look down, and his blink rate goes through the roof. Zelensky is someone who has a pretty normal blink rate, but in this moment, it's not quite a flutter, but we see the eyelids go pop, 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 pop. So a heightened blink rate, which means the number of times we blink in a minute, or eye flutters, which is very fast blinks in succession, usually denote either heightened stress or heightened cognitive load. Our processing, our thought process is very increased. So this doesn't necessarily mean it's a huge negative moment, that he doesn't agree that any progress has been made, but it might be that he's just processing for a moment and he's not so sure progress is being made. But it's about to get a lot more towards the negative the moment Putin is mentioned. Before we look at those behaviors, there's something really important about what Trump is saying as well here, because he's saying, I think progress is being made, very substantial progress, in many ways. This also denotes a lack of confidence in this progress because he starts with, I think progress is being made. This is someone who usually, when he's certain about something, uses very big, certain terms. In this case, I think progress is being made, very substantial progress in many ways. Adding that little thing at the end, in many ways, reduces the confidence of the statement, right? Basically, he's letting us know that progress is being made, but not everywhere, not regarding everything, in many ways, but not always. Now, the moment Trump mentions the president of Russia, we see Zelensky disengage again, but this time it's more drastic. It's not just this little bit of a pulling back. He turns his head centered, so he completely disengages, turns his head more forward like this, and we see this harder, just one downwards nod like this. And we see this very often with him with negative feelings. In fact, we're going to see it again, specifically when President Putin is mentioned. So we see this downwards nod like this, and his whole body becomes more stiff. You'll notice that before there was a little bit of fidgeting with the fingers like this, the leg was moving a little bit more. Now he's very still and he's facing forward after that boom. We also see a hard swallow in this cluster of behaviors, and we see his head start to do these little no gestures like this. Now, we often talk about no gestures on the channel and how they're not as conclusive as people think they are. Like sometimes it could be a positive thing if I'm talking about how unbelievable this restaurant was, like I can't believe it. This is why I often say, let's not jump to conclusions the moment we see somebody do this conversationally. Let's look at the rest of what's going on. The other indication that this is a pretty negative thing is that while his head is shaking like this, we see a couple of blinks, but the first one especially is a very heavy blink. The eye doesn't open all the way up like this. It's kind of like this slower blink, and then he blinks again. And this is very consistent with irritation or being fed up with something. We very often see someone go like, oh, like that. So in this case, if we look at all the other behaviors we just talked about, it's likely that this small shaking of the head does indicate a disagreement or a conflict, especially if we consider the exact words Trump is saying at that moment when we see the gesture. Trump is talking about his meeting with Putin, and he says the words, I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it.
And I think there's a possibility that something could come out of it, and today's meeting is very important. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe.
That is, once again, a very low confidence statement. First, I think. It's not a fact, I think. That there's a possibility, not that something is going to come out of it, but there's a possibility that something is going to come out of it. Not something good, not something great, not something productive. There's no positive adjective there. Something could come out of it. Again, remember, this is a man who speaks with a lot of certainty and positive adjectives when he's sure about something. This is the best thing that's ever happened in this country. We've made some tremendous progress in this situation, but in this case, I think the possibility something could come out of it. And I think Zelensky understands that. This statement is not a substantial promise of anything. It's I thinks and possibilities. And I think that's exactly why we're seeing his head shake. Like, no, it's going to be the same as always. No, I don't think anything good's going to come out of this. No, I don't think Putin wants, any progress to come out of this. So just a disagreement with the whole idea of progress. Now, when Trump leaves the subject of Putin and talks about the 7 very powerful leaders of Europe, we see Zelensky come back to agreement and positivity. And it takes him a second. He doesn't do it right as Trump is saying it. I think he needs a second to just shake this Putin thing off. But then we see immediately he starts shaking. And immediately after that, we even see a compression of the lips. And if you pay close attention, it's a little bit raised. You could tell that by the puffiness of the upper lip. Now, when the lips are tight and raised, this constitutes a mouth shrug. And sometimes you see it all by itself, like this, and sometimes it's combined with other body parts, like the hands and the shoulders, like that, or the eyebrows as well, like that. Now, the research on shrugging tells us that any form of shrug denotes a lack of something, a disengagement, I don't something. But when the mouth is involved, it very commonly falls under the category of an epistemic shrug, which means I don't know what to say, or I don't know what to add to what's already been established. So very often somebody might say something and you really agree and you have nothing to add and you go, yeah, exactly. I have nothing left to add to that. But sometimes it's, I don't know what to say. I don't have the words, which is why we very often see it in moments of shared grief. Like in a sad event, like a funeral, you very often see people greet each other like this. Now, in Zelensky's case, this is very often combined with that head shake. And we're going to see this again and again throughout this entire video. When he agrees with something, you get that head shake with a bit of that compression and it's raised, which very consistently means Yep, I have nothing to add to that. I agree with what you've just said. Then they shake hands and we see Trump do something that's very typical for him, where he extends his hand like this, palm upwards. And usually if he's standing, he grabs down like this, turns it straight, and then pulls the person in. But in this case, they're sitting down, so those hands stay in the middle as they shake hands. And if we look at Zelensky, he does again that kind of tight mouth shruggy smile as he greets him. This is very often seen in polite acknowledgements where we have nothing left to say on that topic. And in social settings, we sometimes see it when we have a greeting, but I'm not looking to start a conversation, just a polite acknowledgement from a distance. And that's what it is here. Just kind of like, okay, that's everything we have to say about that. Let's move on from this. And then he starts to talk. Now, we did a lot of body language. I want to focus on what he says when he talks. First of all, in this 1 minute thing that he says in the beginning, he says thank you or thanks to someone 8 times. That's like baseline Canadian number of thank yous. In fact, the only thing missing for him to go full Canadian mode is to say, sorry about last time, sorry. What I think is going on here is that when he was in the White House in February, he was very much criticized in real time by Vice President Vance. And then later in the media, some people talked about that whole incident and a lack of gratitude. So I think what happened is, whether he has some political advisors or his family, maybe his wife, somebody told him, listen, this time when you go, you can have your demands, you could show that you're not happy with certain situations, but make sure to say your thank yous and show gratitude. And I think for him, he's not really sure where to put those thank yous. He just really wants to make sure they come through, so he just sprinkles them all over the place. He then does something that's psychologically quite clever and that we often see in situations where someone feels like they're at odds with either another person or a collective. And it's basically mentioning who's on his side. So he talks about how the First Lady wrote a letter to Putin about the children of Ukraine. Then he talks about other European countries, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and how he has their support. And basically, this is so that the listeners could see this and go, okay, wow, the First Lady is on his side, all these big countries are on his side, and it makes his side seem more appealing. There is a ton of research on a principle called social proof, which is the idea that even if we like to believe that we think individually, and in some cases we do, in a lot of cases, we think the way the group thinks in order to fit in. Because in the way that we evolved, if you didn't fit in, you'd be outcast, and that would compromise your survivability. This is the reason that we see things on Amazon like bestseller, or on a lot of sporting websites, they'll say this many people looked at this product recently, it's really popular. Or McDonald's, who says billions and billions served. This is very often used in marketing because they know that psychologically when we know, okay, a lot of people want this, it's in demand, maybe I should want this too. And it's the exact same thing here. All these people are supporting him, not Putin. Maybe he's the right side to support. Okay, now we're going to move on and look at the rest of the conversation, a moment that gave me quite a bit of information concerning the relationship between Trump and Zelensky, and another moment that I think a lot of media is overlooking. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content. Oh, and please take a second to hit the like button because it really does help with the success of the channel.
President Zelensky, you say in a post on X today, Russia must end this war, which it itself started. President Trump, you say President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to. Which is it?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think we're going to have a meeting. I think if everything works out well today, we'll have a trilat. And I think there will be a reasonable chance of ending the war when we do that.
Okay, there's a really good moment here that gives us a lot of indications about Zelensky's mindset. So the reporter is asking about what Trump said, that if Zelensky wanted to, he can end this war almost immediately. And as he says that, again, we see disagreement from Zelensky because he's listening and we see this kind of no gesture. This shaking of the head like this is not the only disagreement we're seeing. There's another huge one if you look at the left side of his mouth. Very quickly, we see a little bit of tension. Only one side of the mouth rises, and we even see it causes a line on the left side of his mouth, and it looks like that very quickly. Now, this is very consistent with the universal expression of contempt. There are certain emotions that research has shown look pretty much the same everywhere in the world, and contempt is one of them. It's characterized by a scrunching or tension on one side of the face. Sometimes it looks like this, sometimes it looks like this. And it often causes a line to form on one side of the nose and mouth. And contempt is moral superiority, looking down on something, judging something. But in his peripherals, he could see Trump. And Trump has started to nod like this, like, yes, that's true. And look at what happens to Zelensky's no. It kind of goes to this confusing place where now he's going from this no to this yeah, back to this quick no, back to this quick yeah. A lot of hesitation there. And this is the exact type of behavioral confusion that you often see when someone is reacting but notices that someone that they look up to or care for is reacting a different way, and it causes behavioral confusion. So think about how you might see a husband laughing at an inappropriate joke or comment and then notices that their spouse doesn't find it that funny. You might see something like, and I think that's pretty much exactly what's happening here. Again, I think someone's advised Zelensky and saying, look, we really need their help, so you can't have that conflict like last time. And I think he's trying to be mindful of that. So here he's going, no, I can't really end this thing on my own. But he sees Trump at the corner of his eye agreeing, and it causes him to just go, but yeah. And then as Trump answers the question and says, yeah, I think that's true, we see a bunch of things from Zelensky. His eyebrows go up as his head kind of swings to the side like this, and both of his hands go palm upwards like this. Now, palm orientation is very interesting, and the research on the palms turning upwards tells us that it usually falls into one of two categories. One is knowledge-based. So if I don't know something, my hands might go up like this, which is why it makes sense for it to be part of a shrug. I don't know. But the second one is an exchange of some sort. Either I'm offering something or asking for something. This is why pretty much everywhere in the world, no matter where you're tuning in from, if I do this gesture, it's very much understood as either I'm offering something or requesting something. And I think that's exactly what's happening here. As Trump is saying, yes, he can end it, he's thinking, well, yeah, I can end it if I get help. If I receive the help I need, then yes, I can end this. And I think that's exactly the progression we saw in a couple of seconds. No, this isn't in my hands. Well, maybe it might. I'm not so sure. Maybe it's in my hands. Well, yeah, if I get the help.
President Zelensky, are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years, or are you going to agree to redraw the maps?
Thank you for your question. So, first of all, we live under each day attacks. That today have been a lot of attacks and a lot of wounded people, and the child was dead, small one year and a half. So we need to stop this war, to stop Russia, and we need support American and European partners, and we will do our best for this. So, and I think we show that we are strong people, and we supported the idea of the United States, of personally of President Trump, to stop this war, to make a diplomatic way of finishing this war, and we are ready for trilateral, as President said. This is a good signal about trilateral. I think this is very good. Thank you.
Okay, for this one, we're going to focus more on what's being said rather than the body language, because there's a lot of interesting stuff. First of all, the question itself offers only a limited number of answers because it's not open-ended. It's not like, if this goes on, what are you prepared to do? It's, are you going to send troops off to their deaths or redraw the maps? Those are your only two options. What are you going to do? And what Zelensky provides is a very classic non-answer statement. In interrogation and interviews, whenever a question is asked, there's a very important thing we keep in mind. We ask ourselves, did the response answer my question, and did it answer my entire question? And if it didn't, that's a red flag. Why wasn't my question answered? So in this case, as a response, he talks about a lot of different things. He says we need support to stop the war, stop the Russians. He talks about all the attacks that are going on every single day. He talks about how we're showing our strength, all these different things. But none of them answer the question, which of these two things would you rather do? I mean, I guess when he says that they're showing that they're strong people, he's kind of saying that they're willing to lose lives for this fight, but it's really not a direct answer. And I think the reason for that is because he has a problem with both those options. The first one, to say that he's willing to lose lives, he doesn't like the way that looks. It's not a good look. And the second one, redraw the maps, I think he's shown that he's not willing to do that and doesn't want to do that, which would make sense as to why he keeps shifting towards the support that they need. We need support to not do either of those things.
Vladimir Putin mentioned that the war will not end without addressing the root causes of this war. Have you had an understanding what are the root causes of this war?
Well, look, the war is going to end. When it ends, I can't tell you, but the war is going to end, and this gentleman wants it to end, and Vladimir Putin wants it to end. I think the whole world is tired of it, and we're going to get it ended. It was, I've done 6 wars. I've ended 6 wars, and I thought this maybe would be the easiest one, and it's not the easiest one. It's a tough one.
Okay, a lot of interesting stuff going on here. So the reporter says Putin has stated that this war is not going to end until the root causes are addressed. Do you have an understanding of what those root causes are? And what we get is a non-answer statement. He doesn't talk about those root causes at all. He talks about the fact that everybody wants this war to end and this war is going to end. So he kind of addresses sort of how she set it up, talking about the end of the war, but not the root causes. Now pay attention to the words that Trump is using. This gentleman wants it to end. Vladimir Putin wants it to end. And this is kind of a contrast. And it's even more important when we think about some things that Trump has said in the past. He's often talked about how old friends of his call him and they say, Mr. President or President Trump, and he goes, what are you doing? Like, we've known each other for 30 years, call me Donald.
I got a call the other day. Mr. President, how are you, sir? How are you? I said, Richard, lighten up. Lighten up. Call me Donald. Richard, call me Donald. You've known me for, I don't want to say because I don't want my wife to hear the number.
So he uses first names to symbolize familiarity and closeness. In fact, last week when he was talking about Putin, he said,
Always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir.
However, in this case, in this entire conversation, he never used Zelensky's first name a single time. He never called him Volodymyr, which is important because with Putin, he made a point to use the first name. And here he's not doing that. And in this case, he's not even saying President Zelensky. You know, imagine if he said President Zelensky wants to stand, President Putin wants to stand, all equal. Here it's this gentleman, and that has some distancing in there. This gentleman, it's almost dismissive, like this guy wants it to end. So at the very least, it suggests that there's a closeness with Putin that doesn't quite exist here. And if we think about past events, that would make a lot of sense. Even the way that they're meeting, right? With Putin, he rolled out the red carpet. It was a big event, a whole press conference. There was a whole thing set up. And this is like, hey, come over. We'll sit in the White House. I think Melania made some cupcakes. This is very informal. It's very casual. Now, I will throw a quick caveat at this, and it's the fact that their first names are very similar. It's the equivalent of Vladimir in Ukrainian, Volodymyr. And maybe Trump has built the habit of not using his first name because he knows that when he's talking about this conflict, if he says Volodymyr, it can be very confusing to audiences who know for a fact Putin's first name is Vladimir. So it's possible that that's why he doesn't really use that first name very frequently. But in the way he says, this gentleman, Vladimir Putin, there's a contrast there. Okay, but let's look at the body language because it's great. When he says this gentleman wants it to end, we see Zelensky nodding along like this in agreement. And then when he says Vladimir Putin wants it to end, we see again that one nod downward. So it's not this continued agreement. It's again that same downward head pop that we saw from earlier. And if you pay attention to his lips, they tighten up ever so slightly, but this time there's no raising. It's not this, it's this downwards tightening. I find it really interesting that this is the second time that we've gone from this agreement to this one downwards head bob and then some kind of tension. So I think what's going on here is, again, he wants to seem agreeable, like we saw earlier when he went from this to this. He wants to seem like he agrees with the president. He doesn't want that conflict to happen again. He's very scared of that because it wasn't good last time. So I think here he wants to agree with the president, but he can't really get much more than that one nod. And then we're seeing this kind of lip compression, which is very consistent with, I'm not so sure about that. So I think he's trying to seem agreeable, but I don't think he's so convinced that Putin actually wants this to end. This is also a really good time to talk about their hands. So throughout the whole interview, we're very often seeing Zelensky with his fingers crossed like this, and a lot of what the research has different words for, adapters, manipulators, self-soothing gestures, pacifiers, a lot of research on this, and they're massage-like gestures that help to calm us down in moments of anxiety or stress. It's very consistent throughout. Usually I'm looking for change, right? If in his baseline he's not doing that at all, and then all of a sudden a topic comes up and I see the hands come together and start pacifying, that's really important. But he's doing it throughout. Obviously, this is a very stressful topic. Last time, there was a lot of tension. He's probably trying to avoid that. He's talking about something that's very negative. So it makes sense that throughout we're seeing this kind of posture with him. But what I'm saying is it's so baseline that I'm not paying that much attention to, okay, look, it's happening there and it's not happening there because it's happening consistently. With Trump, we're seeing this lowered steeple a lot. So a steeple is this, and very often in boardrooms, you might see it up here. But when we're sitting at a chair like this, you often see it down there. It's a pretty confident pose. Usually the person who holds the authority in a room is doing that steeple. Often it's down there as well. Every now and then we see it collapse with Trump and come back to this. But throughout, we're getting this kind of confident, in control, lowered steeple.
President Zelensky, you look fabulous in that suit.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, you look good.
I said the same thing.
Yeah, looks good on
I
you.
said the one that attacked you last time. See, now he's in.
I remember that.
Yeah, I apologize to you. You look wonderful. No, my first question for you, President Zelensky.
In the same suit. You see, I changed, you are not.
Maybe yours is much better.
Oh boy, so there's a lot going on here. So this is the same reporter who in February commented on Zelensky's outfit and how he wasn't wearing a suit. He even said, do you own a suit? Because a lot of Americans feel like it's disrespectful to not wear one.
Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Yeah, you have problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not
Really?
respecting
I don't have
the
such.
office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe one.
Maybe something like this?
something like
Yes,
yours.
sir.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Maybe something better. I don't know. We will see.
And in this case, he's saying, you look fabulous in that suit. He's bringing back the subject. And you'll notice Trump turns to Zelensky and says, that's the guy who attacked you last time. And if you look at Zelensky, we see a lot of interesting stuff. The first thing is that he acknowledges what Trump is saying, but it's not with this shaking acknowledgement that he often does. We see this downward pop like this, which we've seen with him in more negative moments. The other thing is, as he's saying, I remember, we see a couple of things. First, we see the eyebrows go up with a slow blink. He closes the eyes like this as the eyebrows go up. I remember. And the research shows that closing the eyes is very consistent with either trying to keep a thought in or keep a thought out. So when we're focusing on something, we close the eyes often when we're trying to remember something, but also often when there's something we don't want to face, we close the eyes as well. In this case, it could be both. It could be like, oh, I remember, like he's remembering it. But I think there's this little bit of a, irritation there. Oh, I remember. Very often when we need a second and something just kind of pushes us the wrong way, we see this kind of slow blink, especially with that eyebrow flash, like, oh, just give me a second here. So with irritation, we might see that. And it's not the only thing we're seeing. There's also a slight chin jut. You notice as he goes, oh, I remember, he comes up and his chin just kind of pokes out for a second like this. And this is very consistent all over the world with pre-aggression or conflict. So very often before a fight, you can see these little chin juts like this. It's kind of the mind thinking of that conflict, that physical conflict. Now you might think that this upwards chin is him nodding like this, but here's the thing. There are people who nod upwards, there are people who nod downwards. Zelensky nods downwards. Even in those moments of agreement, you'll notice it's always downwards like this as he's thinking about something. That's his baseline for nods. So this kind of upwards thing is not very consistent with an acknowledgement for him because he just doesn't do it that way. And you'll notice the dig doesn't end there. He goes after the guy and says, you're still in the same suit. So I brought a new outfit, but you're still wearing the same one from last time. And this is kind of passive aggressive, just a little bit of a jab he's throwing out there. And you'll notice he doesn't go into that smile and relax nod until the guy clearly apologizes and says he looks great. That's where we go from this kind of downward pop and this chin jut, this upwards chin jut, to this more, okay, you know what, fine, you apologize, it's all good, I guess. But I want to talk about this whole suiting up thing. So they're commenting about the suit here, and in the media, a lot of people are saying, he's finally suited up and that's great. And I agree, it is. He heard the complaints, people talked about it, so he wore a suit to kind of address that concern. But for me, there's a little bit of a cliff note on this, just a little sidebar. And it's the fact that this is not a conventional suit by any means. It's not a corporate suit, right? You'll notice the lapel is higher, it's buttoned higher, it's shorter, and it has two heavy square pockets. And this was designed for him by a Ukrainian designer. And the reason I'm saying this is because it doesn't look like a conventional classic corporate suit that you would expect at a meeting like this. It looks a lot like a military outfit, which all have those pockets there with this kind of heightened lapel. So I think there's a message here of like, yeah, you know what? I'll do the thing you asked me of, I'll play along, but not in the way that's common or expected. I still have a message here with my wardrobe.
What guarantees do you need from President Trump to be able to make a deal? Is it American troops, intelligence, equipment? What is it?
Everything. And really, it includes two parts. First, strong Ukrainian army. That's what I began to discuss with your colleagues. And it's a lot about weapon and then people and training missions and intelligence. And second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends on the big countries, on the United States, on a lot of our friends.
Okay, so a lot going on here once again. The reporter is asking, what do you need from President Trump? Is it intelligence, troops, equipment? What do you need? And notice how he gets pretty serious. He leans forward like this and he goes, everything, very clearly. And basically the body language here is suggesting, let me make this very clear. I need everything. And if you look at President Trump, his reaction is also really interesting because as Zelensky goes on to explain that he really needs everything, we're not seeing a whole ton of agreement from Trump. In fact, he's not looking at him. Very often when he's like into what Zelensky is saying, we see him listening like this actively, he turns attention to him. In this case, he turns away, he looks down for a little bit, and then he starts looking up at the reporters with what we call confirmation glances. He's kind of trying to see, how are they taking this? Because the reporters, to a certain extent, represent the American populace. So he's looking at them like, okay, how is this being received? The fact that this guy really needs a ton of resources from us. And right at the end, when he starts listing all the things that he needs, he says people and weapons and training missions and intelligence, we see that lip compression from Trump. And it is a little raised. So it does kind of look a little mouth shruggy, but there's this tension, it's raised, and we're not seeing any other signs of agreement. So it would be different if it was like this. You're like, oh yeah, they definitely need that. I might very much tell you, okay, there's a big agreement here. But in this case, the way he's just looking down, looking up with this kind of one of those things, to me, it looks like this might be a not so sure that you're going to get all of that. I think there is a little bit of disagreement in this compression. The other sign that Trump really wants to just move on from this topic is that when Zelensky goes, and secondly, before he even goes to what he's about to say, now Trump turns his attention back to him, thus signaling like, yeah, let's move away from this. What's next? What's the other thing? Let's not talk about all the things that you need because I'm not really sure how much of that I can help out with.
Intelligence, and second, we will discuss with our partners. It depends.
Okay, so in conclusion, last week we looked at the meeting between Putin and Trump. And if you haven't seen that analysis, I'll leave a link in the description. Please go check it out. There's a lot of really great nonverbal communication. But at the end of it, we could tell from the way Trump was talking that it didn't really go the way he wanted to, and he may not come to a solution as promptly as he had hoped for. In this meeting, we're seeing a lot of that same. Still a bit of uncertainty. And when Zelensky is talking about certain things, we're still seeing that uncertainty from Trump. And from Zelensky, we're seeing that there are definitely moves that are made here to be much less confrontational than last time, but we're sometimes still seeing those subtle disagreements and conflict. So to sum up, I very much think that negativity towards Russia, that desperation for help, I think is still there, but I think he's been coached and came into this with a much less confrontational vibe, because he's saying, okay, let's try it this way. Let's try to play ball and see what we can get. So this is why we're getting a lot of these thank yous. We're getting a lot of him checking in on Trump and reacting in similar ways, even if we see conflict in the way that he sees those things. We're seeing some tension and negativity towards Putin whenever it comes up, but he's not expressing that anger as much. So in the communication, it's different, but the undertones and the emotions still seem very much the same. But let me know in the comments what you think. Let's please try to stay away from politics because that's not what the channel's about, and there's a lot of great nonverbal communication, but let me know which moments for you indicated the most inner conflict and which moments showed a genuine positivity or an effort to show kindness or gratitude. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.